I never expected my first week at Cedar Ridge University to feel like stepping into someone else's nightmare. The campus looked picturesque from the outside. Rolling hills, dense pine forests, and mist curling around the old buildings. But there was something about Hollow Pines Hall that unsettled me the moment I walked through its cracked wooden doors. My name is Alex Carter, and I had moved from the city to pursue a master's degree in environmental science. I'd lived in small apartments and crowded dorms before, but this building, with its peeling paint and long, narrow hallways, had a weight to it, like it remembered every step anyone had ever taken inside it. My roommate, Lila Monroe, was cheerful but cautious. "Don't mind the creaks," she said, unpacking her bags in the room we would share. "These old dorms have stories, most of them true. Just keep your side of the room away from the left wall. Trust me on that." I laughed, assuming she was joking, though the way her eyes darted to the corners of the room made me uneasy. The first 2 nights were quiet enough, aside from the usual groans of an aging building. But on the 3rd night, around 2:30 a.m., I woke to the faint sound of fingernails dragging across the floor. I froze, straining to hear over my racing heartbeat. It sounded like something, or someone, was kneeling right beside my bed. I blinked in the dim moonlight seeping through the curtains. A shadow crouched near the wall, its shape vaguely human but impossibly thin, its edges blurred, like smoke holding a form. I couldn't move. My mind scrambled for a rational explanation. A trick of the light, maybe? A coat or a backpack? But the figure shifted, and a cold awareness settled over me. It was watching, waiting, breathing in sync with me. By morning, I told Lila what I'd seen. She didn't laugh this time. "You're not imagining it," she said, voice low. "It only shows itself to certain people, usually new ones. And the left side of the room, that's where it likes to start." I spent the next few days half expecting it to vanish, convincing myself the old building's strange noises were normal. But then doors started opening by themselves, and I kept finding my desk chair moved slightly from where I had left it. Even worse were the whispers I began to hear at night, soft, broken sounds coming from beneath the floorboards, almost calling my name. One evening, while getting water in the hallway, I ran into another student, Mara, from across the floor. She looked nervous, hood pulled over her head, and her voice barely rose above a whisper. "If you value your sanity," she said, glancing over her shoulder, "stay away from the left wall tonight. It's worse than you think." Before I could ask why, a loud crash echoed from the end of the hall. Mara flinched and disappeared back into her room without another word. My unease had grown into something more tangible. Fear. Hollow Pines Hall wasn't just old and creaky. It was alive. That night, I moved my bed away from the left wall, just as Lila had warned. I tried to calm myself, convincing my mind that this was all paranoia. But the moment I closed my eyes, I felt it again. Cold air brushed against my neck, and something heavy seemed to press down on the edge of my bed. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't even scream. Then I saw it. A figure, taller than any human should be, emerged from the shadow by the wall. Its body was impossibly thin, its limbs bending at angles that made my stomach churn. Its face, if it could be called that, was a swirling void, like a skull carved from smoke. It leaned toward me, dragging something across the floor that sounded like fingernails against wood. My heart felt like it had stopped entirely. Lila woke with a gasp, clutching my arm. "Alex, it's here, isn't it?" Her eyes were wide, filled with a mixture of fear and resignation. She had known. All this time, she had known. "It's not human," she whispered. "It's older than this building, and it feeds on what scares you most. Loneliness, stress, the feeling that no one can protect you. It loves that." I didn't wait to find out more. We bolted out of the room together, slamming the door behind us. The hallway seemed endless, the shadows stretching unnaturally as we ran. Every door we passed groaned or swung slightly open as if the building itself were alive, trying to trap us inside. We pounded on Mara's door until she opened. Her face was pale, and she didn't ask questions. She simply stepped aside and let us in. "You saw it too," she said. "It won't stop until it's satisfied. Leave tonight, or you'll regret it." We packed a few essentials and fled down the main stairwell, hearts hammering. The cold wind outside was a relief, almost cleansing, though the building loomed behind us, silent and watching. No one came after us, but I felt its presence linger long after we reached the safety of the other dorm. The next morning, Hollow Pines Hall was closed off for maintenance issues, though no one spoke of what had really happened inside. Lila transferred the same day, and Mara vanished from the dorm entirely. I stayed in my new room, but even weeks later, I could still feel it. The creeping cold, the whisper of nails on the floor, the sense of eyes watching from the dark. I never believed in the supernatural before, but Hollow Pines Hall changed that. Whatever it was, it didn't vanish. It simply moved on, waiting for the next student, the next sleepless night, the next lonely soul who thought a quiet dorm in the woods would be safe. And sometimes, when the wind is just right, I swear I hear it calling my name, reminding me that it's still out there. I never expected to inherit anything in my life, much less a piece of land in the middle of nowhere. My family isn't the pass things down type. They barely pass down phone numbers. So when I got a letter saying my uncle, someone I hadn't seen in 15 years, left me his old homestead in a rural valley 3 hours outside the city, my first reaction was suspicion. My second reaction was curiosity. I don't know why, but I went. The road to the property wound through empty fields and pine forests, the kind of place where radio stations vanish and the silence feels heavier than normal. The house itself sat on a slope overlooking a dried creek bed, weather-beaten siding, sun-bleached roof, grass tall enough to hide anything inside it. The only thing that didn't look worn out was the padlock on the front door, shiny, new, and deeply out of place. My uncle was strange, at least from what little I remembered. The type of man who avoided holidays, avoided crowds, avoided even his own name in conversations. But the inside of the house made me rethink everything. There were notebooks everywhere, on shelves, on counters, under furniture, hundreds of them. Some old enough that the pages had browned at the edges. Each notebook contained the same kind of writing: dates, times, coordinates, and sketches of structures I didn't recognize. Some pages were filled with formulas I couldn't follow. Others had quick, frantic notes like, "Don't stay on the ridge after dusk. Movement near the lower field again. They're using the tunnels now." At first I thought my uncle had spiraled into paranoia before he died. But the more I read, the less sure I became. Every notebook referenced something called the Orchard Project, though there wasn't an orchard anywhere near the property. According to his notes, there used to be one, but it was cut down before I was even born. Burned, actually. Then I found the key. It was inside a sealed envelope labeled simply, "If you're reading this, don't go alone." But I was alone. The key matched a rusted lock on a cellar door behind the house. When I opened it, cold air rushed out. Not the natural kind, but the artificial cold of machinery running underground. My flashlight beam hit something metallic beneath the dirt steps. At the bottom was a steel door with a keypad. The keypad's display flickered once when I approached. It still had power. That was the first moment I felt watched. Not by animals or neighbors, by something patient, hidden, waiting for me to make the wrong move. I backed away, closed the cellar door, and returned inside to look for more notes. That was when I noticed the camera, a small black device sitting in the window frame aimed directly at me. It was recording. I should have driven away right then, but something in me needed answers. If someone was watching the house, then someone knew I had arrived. And if someone knew I had arrived, they probably also knew I'd opened the cellar. I tore the camera from the window and found a data card inside. I pocketed it and kept searching through my uncle's notebooks until I found one that chilled me more than the cold air in the cellar. This notebook was newer, just a few months old. His handwriting was shaky, rushed. They moved operations underground after the orchard fire. Equipment brought in at night, vans with no plates. Stay away from the lower tunnels. They aren't abandoned. If my nephew gets this, tell him to run. There was more, but the final page was torn out violently, leaving the paper ragged. I didn't know if my uncle died of natural causes or something else, but that torn page made my stomach twist. I decided to check the outbuildings before leaving. There was an old shed near the creek bed, listing to one side like it had given up on life. Inside, I found more equipment: tripods, broken monitors, radio scanners, and a stack of Polaroids pinned to the wall. The first photo was of the property's tree line. The second photo was taken closer. The third photo showed a figure standing between two trees, half hidden, wearing something that looked like a helmet. The fourth photo was different. It was taken from inside the house, at the kitchen table, and I was sitting in the chair, except the photo was dated 2 hours before I arrived. Something crunched outside the shed. Footsteps on gravel. Slow. Intentional. I killed my flashlight and pressed against the wall, barely breathing. The footsteps circled the shed once, then again, then stopped right outside the door. My phone buzzed suddenly, loud in the silence. A message from an unknown number. You weren't supposed to open the cellar. The door handle moved. I didn't think. I ran straight through the back wall of the shed, splintering the rotted boards and tumbling into the weeds behind it. I rolled, scrambled to my feet, and sprinted toward my car. Branches snapped behind me. A flashlight beam swept the field. I reached my car, slammed the door, and peeled out onto the gravel road. I didn't slow down until I saw highway pavement under my tires. I don't know who was in the shed that day. I don't know what the orchard project is. I don't know why my uncle left the property to me. But someone, or something, wanted to keep whatever was underground a secret. And 3 nights ago, someone left a single notebook on my apartment doorstep. No note, no explanation. Just one sentence written inside. You didn't run fast enough. I never expected to inherit anything from my uncle, not after he disappeared from our lives years ago. But when the lawyer's letter arrived, I found myself driving down winding rural roads toward a property I'd never seen. The town of Hollow Bend was small, almost forgotten. Dirt roads, thick forests pressing in from all sides, and a quiet that made my ears ring. My uncle's estate was a cluster of buildings at the edge of the forest. A main house, a small barn, and an abandoned workshop. Even from the road, the paint was peeling, the windows dusty, and the place smelled of old wood and mildew. The first night I explored the main house, everything felt off. There were dozens of old notebooks stacked haphazardly on shelves, each filled with diagrams, strange notes, and photographs of people I didn't recognize. Some were dated decades ago, others were recent. One notebook detailed the layout of tunnels beneath the property, labeled Project Umbra, with schematics of hidden rooms and ventilation shafts. I laughed nervously, assuming my uncle had been some eccentric hobbyist. But the further I read, the less it seemed like a hobby. There were instructions for trapping, surveillance, even chemical experiments. I couldn't shake the feeling that someone, or something, was watching me. At first it was subtle, shadows moving behind curtains, the soft creak of floorboards when I was alone, the faint click of locks I hadn't touched. I tried convincing myself it was the house settling, but the notebooks began to make sense in a terrifying way. My uncle had been documenting people, observers, intruders, even locals who wandered too close. There were diagrams showing how to hide cameras and record every movement in the property. I flipped through a notebook that had a page with a photograph of me. The photo was taken from above, the angle of a hidden camera. My stomach dropped. The next morning, I found footprints outside the workshop, fresh, muddy, leading toward the forest. I should have left then. but curiosity anchored me. I explored the barn, discovering crates marked with symbols I didn't recognize. Inside were tools that didn't belong in a normal barn: syringes, metal restraints, and faded papers with instructions for chemical mixtures labeled composure and tracking. I realized my uncle hadn't just been eccentric. He had been running something illegal, something he had hidden from the world, and now it might still be active. As dusk fell, I locked myself in the main house. That's when I saw it. A light flickering in the workshop, distant but precise, like a flashlight scanning the yard. I pressed myself against the wall, heart hammering. Then a soft, metallic click. Someone had closed the barn door, deliberately. I wasn't alone. I wasn't sure if it was a person or whatever my uncle had been hiding. And from that night on, the sense of being watched didn't stop. I slept with one eye open, the notebook stacked beside my bed, the ink of diagrams mocking me with every shadow that moved across the room. The following days blurred into a cycle of fear and investigation. I couldn't leave the property without seeing someone in the trees or feeling eyes on me from the forest edge. I checked the barn again and found a camera mounted high in the rafters, angled perfectly toward the main house entrance. There were wires running underground, likely connecting to a basement I hadn't yet found. My uncle's notebooks had instructions for a hidden staircase beneath the kitchen floor. Trembling, I lifted the loose plank and descended into darkness. The basement was small, windowless, and smelled of damp concrete and rust. Old monitors lined one wall, screens cracked but still showing faint static. There were dozens of notebooks strewn across a table, each labeled with dates and the names of local residents. Some were scribbled in code. Others were photographs and notes detailing behavior patterns, daily routines, even secrets. Whoever had continued the operation, or whatever my uncle had left behind, was tracking people meticulously. My stomach churned. Suddenly, the monitors flickered. One screen focused on me, the camera angle from the kitchen floor above. I wasn't alone in the basement. The faint scuff of shoes echoed behind me. I spun around, but there was nothing, only shadows stretching across the walls. Then the low hum of electricity surged, and one of the notebooks fell open by itself. On the page was my name, written in the same handwriting as the others, with a note: "Do not leave. Observe." Panic overtook me. I bolted up the stairs, tripping over loose boards. As I slammed the kitchen door behind me, I noticed movement in the corner of my eye. A figure standing just outside the doorway. A man, tall, shadowed, wearing a hood, unmoving, staring. My phone was in my pocket, but there was no signal. I grabbed the first object I could, an old metal candlestick, and backed toward the door. The man didn't move, didn't speak, just stood there, watching. I ran for the main road, hearing footsteps behind me crunching over the dirt and leaves. It was precise, deliberate, like someone had anticipated my every step. When I reached the edge of the forest, the figure paused, lifted its head, and vanished into the trees. My car was still where I had parked, but I didn't dare look back. That night, I couldn't sleep in the house. I sat in my car, notebooks from the basement stacked in the passenger seat. Each page, each diagram, each photo was a reminder someone or something was still operating, still watching. The hidden project had never ended, and in the darkness, I realized the property wasn't abandoned. It was alive, recording, waiting. Even now, weeks later, I catch glimpses of shadows outside my apartment window. Screens I don't own flicker in the corner of my room. The notebooks remain by my bed, open to pages I swear weren't there before. And sometimes, when the wind rustles the leaves outside, I hear the faint click of a camera shutter, and I remember the man in the forest, still watching, still waiting.